Imagine standing before a majestic ancient castle, its moss-covered walls, its towering spires. They all exude the weight of thousands of years of history. You trust its solidity. You trust the foundation laid by generations past. But what if I told you that this castle is floating in midair, that its foundation is nothing but a thick layer of mist? We, modern humans, live with absolute faith in the linear flow of time, dates, years, historical milestones like the fall of the Roman Empire or the birth of Christ are seen as immutable constants. We view them as solid as the laws of physics or the multiplication tables we learned as children. We look at dates on old oil paintings, on yellowed maps, or in ancient manuscripts as beacons lighting the path back into the past. But have you ever asked yourself who lit those beacons? And could it be that they are leading us astray on purpose? Today, we are not talking about trivial conspiracy theories. We are touching upon something far more terrifying: the collapse, the very concept of history. There is a bold hypothesis, considered insane by mainstream academia, a hypothesis suggesting that humanity has been deceived, a grand deception spanning centuries, that a period of 1,000 years, what we call the Dark Ages, in reality never existed. Just imagine Charlemagne, King Arthur, or the Bloody Crusades. What if they were just phantoms, events that were dramatized, or repetitions of other events, pushed back into the past to fill an artificial void? 1,000 years, inflated into human history, just like pumping air into a balloon, to make it look bigger, grander. Before you close this video thinking this is pure fantasy, be patient. Join me on an archaeological journey into the smallest details, the evidence at the crime scene that has been lying in plain sight all along, but which we have unwittingly ignored. If history is a criminal case, then the first piece of evidence lies right on the artifact. It is in the way the ancients wrote their dates. Let's travel back in time to the 18th century. Look at the portrait of August Ludwig von Schlosser, one of the greatest German historians, the man who laid the foundation for the theory of the Russian state. Beneath his name, his birth year is listed as 1735, but wait, let's place a magnifying glass over the first digit. A strange truth emerges. It is not the Arabic number 1 as we write it today. It is the Latin letter I. You might say, oh, that's just an old font style. I thought so too, until I saw this coincidence repeated not once, but hundreds of times, all across Europe. Look at the engraving by Albrecht Dürer, the genius of the German Renaissance. The year is 1524. Dürer was known for his obsession with perfection. Every etched line, every anatomical proportion in his work is absolute. Yet, in the date section, the first character is the letter I, and more importantly, it is formally separated from the rest by dots. I dot 524 dot. Why would a master like Dürer separate the thousands place from the rest? Unless it wasn't a number representing 1,000. And here is where the shocking hypothesis emerges. This letter, I, is an abbreviation for Jesus, the name of Jesus in Latin, and the letter J found in other paintings stands for Jesus. This completely changes the meaning of time. The inscription reads not as the year 1524, but as the 524th year of Jesus. Misunderstanding or a deliberate switch? If this hypothesis is true, then when later historians converted the dating system, they inadvertently or intentionally turned the letter I into the number 1. And just like that, boom, a millennium was born from a single stroke of a pen. But the story of the letter I is just the tip of the iceberg. The absurdity runs deeper. It lies in the total disappearance of original data. Let's try a little experiment. Try to find documents, maps, or paintings dated to the 10th, 11th, or 12th centuries that actually have the date written by the author at the time of creation. You will hit an invisible brick wall. A terrifying silence covers these centuries. Starting from the 15th century onwards, dating becomes standard. 1480, 1492, everything is clear. But take a step back, the 13th century, empty. The 10th century, empty. Mainstream historians explain this by saying, the ancients were modest. They didn't want to record names and dates for fear of the sin of pride. Or they say a parchment was expensive, so old texts were scraped off and reused. But is that explanation satisfactory? A peace treaty between nations, a royal decree, or the consecration of a grand cathedral? And no one cared to record the exact date? This contradicts the most basic instinct of human civilization, the desire to leave a mark on the timeline. This collective amnesia regarding the first millennium, strangely enough, occurred simultaneously across many cultures. Let's look at Russia under Empress Elizabeth Petrovna in the 18th century. The royal cartographers, men who worked with military precision, seemed unaware of the number 1,000. On official naval maps, they wrote, completed in the year 750. No 1,000. Why write 750 instead of 1750? Could it be that for Russians at that time, they were living in the 8th century from the birth of Christ and not just Russia? Let's go to Italy, the cradle of the Renaissance. We often hear the term Quattrocento to describe 15th century art. But what does Quattrocento mean in Italian? Literally means 400. Italians call the 1400s the 400s. They call the 1300s Trecento, meaning 300. They completely skip the 1,000. Why? Could it be that the 1,000 simply never existed in their consciousness? Could it be that for them, Jesus was born only a few centuries prior, not over a millennium ago? Let's put the numbers aside for a moment and look at social development. This is where common sense speaks up. According to official history, after the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century, Europe fell into a hibernation that lasted 1,000 years. The Dark Ages. For 10 centuries. Just imagine. 10 centuries is a terrifyingly long time. We have only experienced 2 centuries of industrialization, and the world has changed beyond recognition. Yet in that 1,000 years, Europe seemed to stand still. Architecture did not evolve. Science regressed. Population did not grow significantly. Roman roads were used but never upgraded. And then, boom, the 15th century arrives. The Renaissance explodes. Like a miracle, literature, art, and architecture rise again. And the strange thing is, Renaissance artists went back to learn directly from ancient Greece and Rome. Historians say it was a rebirth of ancient values. But isn't it more logical to assume that there was no rebirth because it never died, that the Renaissance actually sits right next to antiquity, that the 1,000 years of stagnation is just a blank space inserted in between? The Renaissance craftsmen were not imitating distant ancestors. They were continuing the work of their grandfathers, who lived just a short time before. If history is artificially stretched, like a rubber band pulled too tight, the patterns on it will repeat. Mathematicians, most notably Anatoly Fomenko, have used computers to analyze thousands of chronicles, and they discovered something that sends shivers down the spine. It is the impossible coincidence between dynasties separated by thousands of years. Historical duplicates, glitches in the matrix. Take a classic example. The Holy Roman Empire, the 10th or 13th century, and the ancient Roman Empire for 1st century BC, 3rd century AD. When comparing the ruling charts of emperors in these two periods, they match almost perfectly. King A rules for X years, then 1,000 years later, King B rules for the exact same amount of time. King A is assassinated. King B meets the same fate. The probability of this happening by chance is 1 in a billion. It doesn't stop there. Look at more recent examples. The two Napoleons of France, Napoleon III and Napoleon III. They ruled exactly 50 years apart, but their lives are like mirror images. Both were artillery officers. Both came to power via a coup. Both fought wars in the East, and the fates of their children match perfectly. Or consider the Catherine shift. Ancient Roman history and medieval Russian history contain identical events, but shifted by exactly 1,168 years. Every time a Roman chronicle describes a war with barbarians, exactly 1,168 years later, a Russian chronicle describes a similar war with the exact same outcome. This suggests a terrifying scenario. Could it be that later scribes faced with fragmented, scarce records of the past, inadvertently copied the same event but assigned it to different dates? They read about a great war. One placed it in the 1st century, another placed it in the 12th. And thus, we have two wars, two kings, two empires, when in reality, there was only one. Noack, we must ask the most important question of any investigation. Cui bono? Who benefits? Why would anyone go to the trouble of creating an entire fake millennium? Who had enough power, enough resources, and most importantly, enough motive to pull off this grand deception? The answer may lie with the two dominant forces of Europe at the time, the monarchy and the church. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Europe was forming nation-states. Power needed legitimacy. Nothing cements a throne better than a lineage stretching back thousands of years, connected to mythical heroes or great Roman emperors. A king with ancestors ruling from a millennium ago has far more authority than a usurper. But the biggest motive perhaps belongs to the Vatican. By extending history, creating a vast distance from the time of Jesus to the present, the church created a buffer zone. In that buffer zone, the so-called Dark Ages, the church appeared as the sole torch of civilization. They held the knowledge. They held the past. By monopolizing the writing of history, they controlled the present. The longer the history, the deeper the dogma, the more absolute the authority. We cannot overlook two names, Joseph Scaliger and Dionysius Petavius, two Jesuit scholars living in the 16th and 17th centuries. They were the ones who systematized human history. They arranged the dynasties, calculated the dates of Easter, and created the chronological framework we use today. But on what basis did they do this? Based on fragmented texts, copies of copies, and more importantly, based on theological ideology. It is very possible that in the process of rearranging history, they made serious mathematical errors. Or worse, they intentionally stretched time to fit sacred numerology. So finally, what should we believe? I am not here to force you to burn your history textbooks. I am not claiming with 100% certainty that Charlemagne did not exist, or that this year is actually only 1024. The purpose of this journey is to awaken something sleeping inside each of us. Critical thinking. History, after all, is not an exact science like math or physics. We cannot put Napoleon in a lab to test him. History is a collection of stories, told by the winners, written by flesh and blood humans, people who make mistakes, hold biases, or bow to pressure from power. The portrait with the letter I, the map missing a millennium, the strange duplicates between dynasties, all are cracks in the solid wall we call the past. Perhaps 1,000 years of history really were added. Perhaps it is just a misunderstanding of later generations. But whatever the truth is, daring to ask the question, daring to look straight into those cracks is the only way we get closer to the truth. Because who knows, the greatest secret of humanity might not lie in the distant stars of the future, but is hiding right in the old pages, right under the dust of time that we thought we understood so well. And you, are you living in the year 2024 or 1024? Thank you for joining me on this insane journey.